forgive me if I've told this story before. In 2009, at the camp where I met Kristen, I also met a whole bunch of other people who have become lifelong friends. One of those people was named Jesse, and there wasn't anything I'd particularly noticed, but I think they were the office floater that year. They worked in the office and then floated off to do whatever else needed to be done. Floaters, at Jamonville, floater was just another word for gopher. You just go for stuff. But, I had picked up that they loved God, they loved the kids that they were working with, and at the end of the summer, they came out as gay, and it went, oh, because I had grown up in a culture where you can't be gay and Christian, and all of a sudden, I was faced with a contradiction. Much like the contradiction, well, not much like, but somewhat like the contradiction that Peter was faced with in the scripture this morning. Peter believed that all Christians, well, they weren't even called Christians. All followers of the way, as they would call it, followers of Jesus, were Jewish. And I made a lovely little Venn diagram there. If you were a follower of the way, you were Jewish. All of them at that point. To be a Jewish follower of Jesus was, at that time, you'd call it a retronym. Retronym is a fun word that I learned last week. You know what that means? It's where you slap a label on something to describe how it used to be before there became more than one version of it. Like an analog watch, or a, what'd you call it? Analog audio, or I think they used to call them safety bicycles, were the wheels with bikes with two sizes, and then the old one became penny farthing bikes, but before it was just a bicycle. Now you've got Jewish followers of Jesus. Well, there isn't any other kind, except now, after Peter has talked to Cornelius, there is. You've got Gentile followers of the way too. And that's kind of an awkward Venn diagram if we squeeze them together. Jump to the next one. Yeah, now we've got Jewish followers of the way, and we've got a few Gentile followers of the way. And that's kind of a problem because, well, what do you do? How do you assimilate those Gentile followers of the way? What do you do with them? The thing is, furthermore, Cornelius is the Rosa Parks of Gentile believers. What I mean by that is, y'all know the story of Rosa Parks, right? She got arrested for not giving up her seat on a bus for a white man. But did y'all know that about 9 months before Rosa Parks, another black woman got arrested for not giving up her seat on a bus? Her name, some of you know the story, was Claudette Colvin. The difference between her and Rosa Parks was she was 16, unmarried and pregnant, and her skin was darker than Rosa Parks. And the local leadership said, we don't want to make her the face of this movement because racist white people are not going to get behind this woman who's like really dark-skinned, and also she's pregnant, and they're going to like smear her in all kinds of different ways. Don't make her the face of the movement. And then 9 months later, Rosa Parks works for the NAACP, 45 years old, married, lighter skin than Claudette Colvin, and they go, she's a great poster child for this movement. That's going to get white people to go, wow, this is really messed up. Cornelius is the Rosa Parks of Gentile believers. He is a God worshiper. He's well spoken of by all of the Jews. He gives financially to support them. He's the one where you go, okay, well, clearly, and his family is well spoken of by all the Jews in the area. Clearly, he's going to be okay. I think if Peter had instead met people who became part of the Corinthian church, he would have run screaming in the other direction. That clearly didn't hit. If Peter had met the Corinthian churches, he would have run screaming in the opposite direction, because they were doing stuff that it made Paul write strongly worded letters. Cornelius was the Rosa Parks, but they had to go, okay, but even with the Rosa Parks of Gentile believers, they had to go, all right, what are we going to do with them? How are we going to assimilate them? Because as previously mentioned, there were only Jewish followers of the way. And yes, some of them were born Jewish and some of them were proselytes who'd converted to Judaism, but it was all just Jewish followers of the way. No Gentiles. And now it is. So you go, okay, what do we need to do? And clearly the solution is circumcise them and make them Jewish. And that is one of the arguments that they have. Can you bump that up there? I'm sorry. Missed a point. No, go back to it. Go back to that. Peter has this realization that it's not just Jewish people, it's in every people. Anyone who fears God and practices righteousness is acceptable to God. It's not just Jews, Gentiles. Those who honor God and do what's right, that's who God accepts. But there's still that thing about, okay, we have to assimilate these people because they're not like us. They're different. And if you jump to the next one here, God has enabled Gentiles to change their hearts and lives. The New Revised Standard Version says repent, so that they may have new life. Get that? The Gentiles also have to change. They have to become like us. We got to make them the way that we are, so that they can be fully assimilated into this movement. We got to change them. I think this is the slide I was looking for now. Yeah, we gotta move them and make the Gentile followers the way. We got to make them Jewish. And James, having done the sensible thing and, God forbid, listened in the first place, this happens in a few chapters later, says, well, wait a second, the Holy Spirit fell on them before they were baptized. And honestly, this whole Jewish thing has been a lot of work for us. None of us have been able to fully keep it. Let's compromise. Let's just make them, well, what's the least Jewish you can be and still be a follower of the way? Could you jump us to the next one? Yeah, we don't mean to make them all the way Jewish, just like a little bit Jewish. Just sufficiently Jewish that they can be followers of the way. And in Acts 15, he comes up with 4 rules. And who knows what those 4 rules are? Anyone? Bueller? No, it wasn't love God, love your neighbor. Not circumcision. They said, nope, that's a bridge too far. I think if you asked 100 people for the top 100 list of things that you need to do to be a Christian, no one is going to guess the things that James suggested. What's that? What? Fasting? Not fasting. It was refrain from things strangled and from blood and from sexual immorality. You might get sexual immorality today if you asked 100 people what the top 100 things you have to do to be a Christian are. But it's in Acts 15. They write this letter and they go, okay, and that's the really important stuff. That is the amount of Jewish that you have to be a Gentile follower of Jesus. That's it. And most of that got thrown by the wayside and forgotten because, and we covered this in, I think it was my missiology course, because as from Acts, they go out, and as the gospel encounters other cultures, it changes. the gospel becomes less Jewish as it leaves the Jewish people and becomes more Gentile. When the gospel goes to India, the church becomes Indian influenced. When the church goes to everywhere it goes, it gets reshaped and shifted, and it changes. One of my favorite stories that I heard in seminary, I found out it came from, I think, a professor named Mark Powell. He was teaching seminary students, and he said, we're going to read the parable of the prodigal son. And when they went through it, he said, tell me what you heard in the story. And they all heard different things and also missed. A lot of them missed or misremembered parts of the story. And one of the things he picked up on was when he asked, why was he hungry? The American students all said the same, mostly said it was because he had squandered all his money, which is a very American answer to that question, because we are all about personal responsibility. It was because he'd squandered his money. Then he had the opportunity to take that question to a church in Russia. And after World War II, there had been a massive amount of famine, and people had gone hungry. And he said, why were they hungry? And in Russia, most of the people said, well, he went hungry because there was a famine. The Americans, like 6%, I think, of the Americans noticed that he went hungry because there was a famine and listed that as one of the reasons. It's in the text. But they didn't see it because they had no experience of famine. Their experience was it's all about personal responsibility. And then he had the opportunity to go to Tanzania. And he asked them, why was he hungry? You know what they said? He was hungry because it says nobody gave him anything. Because in that culture, it was horrifying and disrespectful to say that someone's hungry and you don't feed them? What is wrong with you? All these different things that if you're just looking at it from an American point of view, you just go, oh, well, it's because he was irresponsible with his money. And I was trying to find out where did this story come from, and I looked it up this morning, and I found a blog where another pastor had read this story, but funny story, he served in Jordan. And he thought, I'm going to ask them here, what's the answer to that question? Why was he hungry? And you know what they said? Because he left his father's house. What? And wherever you go, wherever the gospel goes, it takes on a different shape and a different tint. Did you know that when we lived in Benton Harbor, I was part of a ministerial alliance there were like 2 or 3 white pastors, men, and 1 white female pastor, Pastor Lori Hartzell, who was here for my installation service. For the longest time, it was mostly black men and Lori. And I joined it, and I would go sometimes. And I noticed something really fascinating. If you've ever been in a predominantly black church, and maybe it's not all of them, but there was a picture of Jesus being baptized above the baptistry, and Jesus was black. And coming from, having gone to seminary, I know Jesus wasn't white, though in white churches, y'all can picture in your heads the Jesus picture that I'm talking about. He has long flowing hair and he is very European white, right? But where the gospel goes, Jesus starts to look different. And all of these things, it changes. And we get a bigger, fuller understanding of who God is when we hear the story of God from people who are different from us. It's fascinating, the stuff that we learn when we encounter someone who's different from us, who is also a follower of Jesus, and we go, oh, I didn't know God could be like that. Well, no, you didn't, because you hadn't met someone with that different perspective. It's so fun and interesting. One of the other pieces of this, I think we're finished with the slides, right? Yeah, I think we're finished. One of the other pieces of this, the things that I have learned about God from my LGBTQ friends, one of the things was, oh, well, Jesus would not have had I don't remember my chromosomes. If Jesus was born of a virgin, he would not have had a Y chromosome? I don't remember my chromosomes. Wouldn't have had a Y chromosome, so he would have been in the identity group that some people would identify as transgender. Oh, that's right. I went to the, what's that? Calvin Symposium on Worship, and I encountered some very different ways of doing worship. I went to a conference with Korean worship, and it did not feel like worship to me because it was very, very different. And I was just like, okay, this is not working for me. I'm glad that you all are able to worship God in this way, but it doesn't work for me. I'm not connecting with God in this service, And that's okay. There is an evangelical pastor named, I'm not sure if I call him evangelical, but named Francis Chan, and he talked about talking to someone after worship who said, I didn't really like worship today. And he said, that's all right, we weren't worshiping you. And it's a great clap back, and I've seen a lot of Presbyterian pastors say that, but at the same time, I think what that person was really saying was, I didn't feel like the way that we did worship this morning was enabling me to worship God. And he was just really, I thought that it was a dismissive answer. And yeah, it's funny, but it's also kind of dismissive. And you're like, okay, because it wasn't working for them, but it was working for a lot of the other people. So at the Calvin Symposium on Worship, I ran into some folks called the Hymn Society. They write hymns. It's a group of people who connect and submit new hymns. And some of those folks are members of the LGBTQ community, and they actually put out a booklet called Songs for the Holy Other, and it brought in things that they had learned from the queer community, or songs that had been written by LGBTQ people. And the next song that we're going to sing was written by someone who identifies as being a member of the LGBTQ community. The book didn't specify which of the letters he was, but I assume his name is Mark. And he put stuff in the hymn that we're about to sing that I, as a straight white man, would never have thought to put in there. For example, the last verse describes God, and I almost hate to spoil it, as fabulous. Absolutely, but I would never have said that as a straight white man. I would never have written to describe God as fabulous. Or there's another word in there is deviance. He describes God as deviant. And that's a word that has been used to describe the LGBTQ community. But I wouldn't have thought to apply that to Jesus, but that's because I'm not a member of that community. And but it's very different. I mean, who's born of a virgin? Who's executed and raised from the dead? It's very off the... Jesus is different, or he deviates from the norm. So I'm going to invite us to stand and try out that hymn. You will recognize it because it is to the words of another song that you know. I don't remember the name of it at the moment. Take it to the Lord in prayer. If you've heard that song, you'll be able to sing this one.